Good morning, dear students. Did you know it's been more than 5 months since our Honorable Prime Minister announced the lockdown? Some of you may have been happy to stay home, and some of you may miss going to school. But can you imagine being in lockdown or staying under a certain rule your whole life, where you are not allowed to do anything you want and only listen to a certain group of people? How would that make you feel? The situation in India in 1907 was similar. I want you all to imagine this now. The Indian National Congress had just been formed because of the treatment of the Indians by the British. India was uniting together towards a common goal of freedom from the British rule. So emotions were running high, and one of the key events that happened was the murder of an English officer Rand by the Chapekar brothers.
जंग आजादी के इतिहास में चापेकर बंधुओं का नाम सुनहरे अक्षरों में दर्ज है। साल 1897 का था। पुणे में प्लेग जैसी भयंकर बीमारी से लोग जूझ रहे थे। ऐसे में वॉल्टर चार्ल्स रेड और आयरिस्ट, दो अंग्रेज अधिकारी, लोगों को यातनाएं दे रहे थे। बस फिर क्या था, चापेकर बंधुओं का सब्र का बांध टूट गया। उन्होंने अंग्रेजी सरकार को खुली चुनौती दे डाली। तारीख 22 जून 1897, जगह पुणे का गवर्नमेंट हाउस। फिरंगी महारानी विक्टोरिया की डायमंड जुबली बनाने में मशगूल थे। दामोदर हरि ने, चार्ल्स रेड और बालकृष्ण हरि ने आरएस पर गोली चला दी। चार्ल्स रेड की मौके पर ही मौत हो गई, जबकि आयरिस बुरी तरह घायल।
As you saw, the Indians were getting aggravated. But the British, to try and subdue them, tried to connect the relation of the assassination of Rand with Lokmanya Tilak, who was one of the key leaders in India fighting against the British. They imprisoned him. Tilak was imprisoned a number of times in his lifetime. One of the times he was in Mandalay prison, he wrote Gita Rahasya, which was the philosophy of Karma Yoga, and stressed that people should always be in action. And that was the political scenario which we will be studying further today as we continue our chapter on the beginning of the freedom movement. The British were now getting tensed seeing India united, and so they decided to use the policy of divide and rule. The viceroy of that time was Lord Curzon, and he came up with this plan. He wanted to break up this united India, and he wondered how to do it. So, he suggested that the vast empire of Bengal be divided into two for administrative reasons. He said that Bengal was a very large province and it was very difficult to work out its administration or its functioning. But in actuality, he was dividing the Hindus and the Muslims. East Bengal had a majority of Muslims, and West Bengal had a majority of Hindus. He knew that if he got Indians to fight within themselves, then they wouldn't be united to fight against the British. So he planned to separate the Hindus and Muslims within Bengal. This shook the foundations of the Indians. On 16th October 1905, the day of the partition of Bengal was observed as a national mourning day. Mourning means to cry and be sad. All over India, there were protests against this decision. People were singing Vande Mataram during the protests. The Indians, to show their unity, celebrated Raksha Bandhan. Can you guess how this would have helped? Hindus and Muslims were coming together, tying Rakhis as a sign of brotherhood. This would upset the very foundation of what the British were trying to do. Students stopped attending government schools and colleges and instead went to attend the protests and participated in this movement. The main leaders of this movement were Surendranath Banerjee, Anand Mohan Bose, Rabindranath Tagore, and others. This became a national movement, and because of this nationwide movement, the British saw how unhappy the Indians were and they annulled the partition of Bengal. Annulled means that they stopped it. This took place in 1905. So now the Indians realized that only when there was some form of outrage would the British listen. And so from 1905 to 1920 began the extremist phase. You may remember when we spoke about the moderate phase where the leaders believe in constitutional methods for the British to listen to our demands. What does that mean? This means that they wrote letters or they tried to have meetings with the British and, in other words, tried to politely ask them for freedom. But when the British turned a blind eye to the Indians, they started getting angry. You imagine it for yourself. You are living in your home with your family, and suddenly someone comes and starts living with you and telling you and your parents how to run your home. You are all initially scared of this person, so you all don't speak up. But finally, you'll find the courage to do it and you'll politely ask the person to leave. But the person doesn't listen at all. And so, what will happen next? You will begin getting angry and you'll think of ways in which you can get them to leave. In the same way, the Indians also began getting angry, and that began the extremist phase. Extremist in the dictionary means a person who holds extreme political or religious views. Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and Bipin Chandra Pal were some of the extremist leaders. An easy way to remember them is Lal, Bal, and Pal. They were united with the Indian National Congress and agreed with their objectives, but they felt like it was time to do something more to get the attention of the British. And so they did this in three parts. 1. Newspapers. 2. Through national festivals. And 3. Through national education. Let's talk about newspapers. The Kesari and Maratha were newspapers through which Lokmanya Tilak disapproved the various ways that the British government were trying to suppress the Indians. The Amrit Bazar Patrika was another newspaper in which the extremists voiced their opinions. So, through these newspapers, the extremists were igniting the animosity against British in the Indians. The second way in which Tilak got people together was through national festivals. How, you may wonder? He said that by forgetting the internal differences between the Hindus and Muslims, people should come together and exchange their ideas. And even people who can't speak up should get inspiration from the leaders. And so he started organizing Shiv Jayanti and Ganesh Utsav. He knew that if people come together for protests or morchas, then the British government would try to stop it. But if people came together for religious reasons, then the government will not ban it. And so people joined hands together and celebrated these great festivals. The third way in which extremist leaders united people and raised nationalism was by establishing educational institutions like schools and colleges. They believed they need to raise a generation that is proud of their own language and tradition and not learn the ways of the British. In this way, they will instill feelings of nationalism within younger people as well. Haven't you realized there is great power in number? When a group of people unite, they are able to accomplish a lot more. Let's watch this video.
It's smarter to travel in groups.
In the same way that the extremist leaders were uniting India, we also need to be united today. There is more power when a group of people are speaking rather than just one person. Unity is strength, and we can stand up for anything wrong that is happening around. The extremist leaders also knew this, and they knew that only if lakhs of people come together to take part in the freedom movement and challenge the British government will change take place. They believed that the movement should be more severe, and even then, they didn't take up guns or didn't do anything violent. They believed that only when a crowd unitedly gets together and makes a noise will there be any movement among the British. Gopal Krishna Gokhale was the president of the Indian National Congress session of 1905, and he supported the Anti-Partition of Bengal movement. In 1906, Dadabhai Nauroji was the president, and he was the first to use the word Swaraj from the stage. In his presidential speech, he told the people to stay united, keep trying, and fulfill the aim of Swaraj, so that in the future we will be able to save lakhs of people suffering from poverty, hunger, diseases, and India will get a respectable position among all the other developed countries. In this same session, the 4-point program was accepted by the Indian National Congress. The 4-point program was Swaraj, Swadeshi, national education, and boycott. Let's understand what each of these mean. Swaraj means complete freedom from the British rule. Swadeshi meant only using goods that have been produced in India. National education meant a wide spread of education across the country, igniting young minds about India and the Indian culture. And boycott meant to stop following the rules of the British as a means of protesting. We had learnt before that the British were exploiting India, but with the Swadeshi movement, Indians would be self-sufficient because they would be using goods only manufactured in India. It was decided that the first step would be Swadeshi, deciding to boycott all foreign goods. And then the Indians would boycott or stop following the rules placed on them by the British. Through this, Indians would be able to weaken the British hold on India. And so, with all of this excitement happening all around India, We will need to stop the class today. We'll see in the classes to come what happens next. I love learning about the Indian freedom movement. I hope you enjoyed learning too. But let's see how much you learned today. These are some questions you can ask yourself. The first one: what was the policy used by the British to create a division between Hindus and Muslims? Can you remember it? It was the policy of divide and rule. If the Indians were fighting amongst themselves, then they wouldn't be united against the British government. All right, the second question: who were the main leaders of the extremist movement? I had given you a very easy way to remember this. Can you remember it? It was Lal, Bal, and Pal. Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and Bipin Chandra Pal. All right, the last question. What was the 4 points in the 4-point program? I hope you got this. It's Swaraj, Swadeshi, national education, and boycott. Alright, so for homework today, why don't you read pages 25 and 26 of your history textbook? After we complete this lesson, we'll have a recap test. So try and watch the videos and read your books to remember as much as you can. And I'll see you in your next class. Bye!